He said I was cold, that I didn't feel things like a normal child. He said I needed to be taught how to feel. He started with the belt. At first it was fast, sharp, like a warning, but warnings never stop monsters. And then came the knife. I was 7. I still remember the exact sound it made when it left the drawer, a slow metallic scratch, like something waking up from sleep. He didn't raise his voice. He never had to. He just looked at me and said, "Let's see what you're really made of." The first time he didn't cut. He just held it against my skin, pressed the cold metal against my arm and watched me flinch. "So you do feel," he whispered. Then he smiled like he had found something worth playing with. He called it a game. Our house was always quiet, not peaceful, just quiet. The kind of silence that makes you listen to your own heartbeat. My father hated noise. He said loud things were disrespectful. That's why no one ever heard me cry. Not that I ever tried. You learn very quickly what happens when you make noise in a house like that. We lived on the edge of town. Neighbors far enough that nobody could hear a scream. A small white house with a crooked mailbox and a porch light that never worked. On the outside, it looked harmless. But every time that porch light flickered, my stomach twisted. He would come home at exactly 6 every evening. The key would turn once, then twice, slow and deliberate. That sound still wakes me up sometimes. I'd be sitting at the table pretending to do homework, hands shaking, trying not to sweat too much because he hated the smell. He said it made him angry. Dinner was always silent. He didn't like small talk. He didn't ask how school was or what I learned. He just chewed, stared, swallowed, stared again. And I learned to mirror him, still, quiet, obedient. I thought maybe if I was invisible enough, he would get bored. I was wrong. The first cut was on a Tuesday. He called me into the kitchen after dinner, told me to roll up my sleeve. I hesitated. He grabbed my wrist, held it tight like he was measuring my pulse. Then he pulled out the knife. It was long, old, with a wooden handle and tiny rust spots near the edge. "Hold still," he said. And I did. I always did. The blade pressed into my skin slowly, like he was drawing something. A thin red line appeared and then deepened. The pain came later. At first it was just warm. Then it burned. I gasped. He looked at me like he had won. "There it is," he said. "You do feel. We'll keep going until you feel everything." He left me bleeding on the floor. I didn't cry. Not that night. Not the next. My skin started to tell a story no one wanted to read. Little scars on my arms, my legs, places a child shouldn't have marks. I wore long sleeves in the summer. I avoided gym class. The other kids said I was weird. I told them I bruised easily. One girl said I looked like a doll someone didn't want anymore. She was right. He didn't always use the knife. Some nights, it was the belt again, or his hands, or nothing at all. Just words. But those cut deeper. He said I was broken, that I made him this way, that if I didn't look at him like that, he wouldn't have to do it. I didn't even know what that meant, but I tried to stop doing it, whatever it was. The worst part wasn't the pain. It was the way he enjoyed it. The way he would tilt his head when the blood started to drip, like he was watching something beautiful unfold. "There's life in there," he'd say, dragging his finger through the blood. "You see, you're not so empty after all." He never needed a reason. It wasn't about punishment. It wasn't even about anger. It was about control, about turning a living thing into something that couldn't resist. And I gave in. I let myself become what he wanted, because fighting made it worse. And silence was the only thing I had left. He said I didn't scream like the others, that I was different, that I made him feel calm. That scared me more than anything. The idea that my silence made it easier for him, that maybe I was the perfect victim. Some nights, he would make me sit with him after, while he cleaned the knife. He had a small cloth he kept in a drawer just for that. He said you had to treat your tools with care. That blood could ruin the edge if you didn't wipe it down right. I memorized how he folded the cloth, how he checked for spots, how he held the blade up to the light and smiled. It became a ritual. My body stopped being mine. It became something to be tested, sliced, bent, observed. He started making small bets with himself. Let's see if she twitches this time. Or, I bet this one leaves a scar. Sometimes, he made me look at it while he did it, told me to watch closely, to remember. This is your truth now, he said. You don't get to forget. And I didn't. I couldn't. The smell of metal, the weight of silence, the way blood feels when it sticks to your skin and dries before you can wash it. I learned all of that before I learned multiplication, before I could write cursive, before I even lost all my baby teeth. I was 7, and I already knew what it meant to be dissected without dying. That house didn't have monsters under the bed. It had them sitting at the dinner table, holding knives, smiling. And I knew deep down this was only the beginning. My mother always came in after it was over, never during, never when it could have made a difference. She would wait until the room was quiet again, until he had closed the door behind him and gone to bed, or back to the living room like nothing had happened. That was her cue. She'd walk in with a rag and a bowl of water. Her face was always blank, like this was laundry, like this was routine. The first time she saw the blood on my arm, she didn't ask how it got there. She didn't even look surprised. She just knelt beside me, dipped the rag in warm water, and began to clean it. Her touch was neither gentle nor rough, just mechanical. She pressed too hard sometimes, not noticing when I winced. Or maybe she did notice. Maybe she just didn't care. I asked her once why he hurt me. I was so small. My voice barely came out. She didn't answer, just kept scrubbing, her eyes fixed on the wound like it was something that needed to disappear before it stained the floor. When she finished, she stood up and said, without looking at me, "You need to stop provoking him." That sentence never left me. I didn't understand it at the time. I thought maybe I had done something wrong, that I moved too fast, that I made a sound I wasn't supposed to. But later, much later, I realized it was her way of shifting the blame, her way of surviving by pretending she wasn't part of it. But she was. Her silence made her part of it. Sometimes she cried, not in front of me, never with me, but I'd hear her in the bathroom with the door locked, muffling sobs with a towel. I used to think that meant she cared, that maybe it hurt her too, but the crying always ended. The door would open, and she'd go right back to folding laundry or peeling potatoes or pouring his coffee like nothing had happened. There were days I'd sit on the edge of my bed with blood still crusted around the cuts and wait to see if she'd come. Sometimes she did, sometimes she didn't. Once I stayed like that all night. The next morning, she handed me a clean shirt and said, "Don't let anyone at school see that." That was the closest she ever got to acknowledging what was happening. She wasn't stupid. She knew everything. She knew when I flinched at his voice, when I refused to eat, when I started wetting the bed again. She saw the bruises, she saw the scars, she saw the way I stopped talking and how my eyes stayed down. She chose not to act, and that choice was its own kind of violence. I used to watch her when she cooked. Her hands moved fast, precise. She could peel an apple in one perfect spiral. She kept the kitchen spotless, everything in its place. Sometimes I wondered if she scrubbed so hard because it was the only thing she could control. But other times, it felt like she was trying to wash me away, like if she cleaned enough, she wouldn't have to see what he had done to me. There was one night I remember more than the rest. He had left marks on my stomach, deep ones. I couldn't walk straight. I had a fever. My lips were cracked from crying with my mouth closed. I sat on the floor, shaking, waiting. She came in with a towel and peroxide. Didn't say a word, just started cleaning me. I asked, "Why won't you help me?" Her hand froze, just for a second. Then she kept cleaning. Her eyes never met mine. It became clear that my suffering was something she had accepted, not because she wanted it, but because it was easier than fighting it. Maybe she had her own wounds, her own fears. Maybe she thought no one would believe her either. Or maybe she was just too tired to care. She didn't love him. I know that now. I saw the way she moved around him, like walking on broken glass. But she also didn't love me enough to stop him. And that realization, that tore something open inside me, something worse than the knife ever could. I started to see her not as my mother, but as another part of the house, a fixture, a piece of furniture that didn't protect or comfort. She was the cold tile floor, the dim hallway light, the locked cabinet where he kept the belt. She was everything that stayed silent. People think a mother's love is automatic, that it's natural, but love is a choice, and she made hers, over and over again. When teachers asked why I was quiet, she said I was shy. When I missed school from the pain, she said it was the flu. When they called about bruises, she said I fell off my bike. She had stories ready, lies prepared. She was never caught off guard. It was like she practiced. She ironed my uniforms, packed my lunch, braided my hair. From the outside, we looked like a family. Inside, we were something else entirely, a performance, a lie that lived in daylight and bled in the dark. One morning I remember walking into the kitchen. She was cooking eggs. He was sitting at the table. She was laughing at something he said. I stood there with my arms crossed, hiding the newest cuts. She looked at me and smiled, like nothing had ever happened, like we were normal. That smile was the final break for me. It wasn't sadness or guilt or fear. It was indifference. I realized then that I could be dying and she would still scramble eggs, still clean the knife, still press a rag to my skin and tell me to stop making him angry. My childhood wasn't stolen, it was handed over, piece by piece, by the one person who was supposed to protect it. And every time she wiped the blood from my skin, I wondered if she saw herself in me, if she thought, this is what I once was, or if she looked away because she couldn't bear to face the truth. But truth doesn't disappear when you close your eyes. It clings to you, it follows you, it stains your hands, even when you scrub until they bleed. She never said sorry, not once, and that silence said everything. It started on a night when my body was already broken. I had a fever, the kind that makes your bones feel like they're shattering from the inside out. My skin was hot to the touch, but I was shivering. My mouth was dry, my throat raw. I remember lying in bed with the blanket wrapped around me so tightly I couldn't move. I thought maybe he would leave me alone that night. Maybe the fever would protect me like armor. It didn't. He came in without knocking. He never knocked. His shadow filled the doorway like it belonged there. I didn't have the strength to sit up. I didn't even look at him. Maybe I thought that if I stayed still enough, quiet enough, I would become invisible. He stood over me and stared for a long time. I could feel his breath, slow and steady, like a metronome ticking before disaster. Then he reached down, pulled the blanket away from my body, and said, almost gently, "You look weak. That's good. Weak things don't fight." He dragged me off the bed and onto the kitchen floor. The cold tiles shocked my fevered skin, and I let out a sound. Not a scream, not even a word. Just a broken exhale. That was enough for him to smile. He liked when my body reacted without my permission. He made me lie on my back. The tiles were rough. One of them had a crack that ran straight through the middle. I stared at that crack while he undressed me. I counted the lines in the tile like it was a game, something to keep my mind away from what was happening. The knife came out next. It was the same one as always. The wooden handle was darker now, stained with time and other things I didn't want to think about. He held it with care, like it was precious, like it was a part of him. He pressed the blade against my collarbone, not hard enough to break the skin, just enough to make me freeze. Then he traced it down my chest, over my stomach, until it rested on my hip. I didn't move. My body had learned how to play dead. He liked that too. "You're quiet tonight," he said. I liked that. He began to touch me with his other hand. The blade never left my skin. Every time I flinched, it pressed down a little harder. It was his way of teaching me stillness, of training my fear into silence. He started asking questions. That was new. He asked if I thought I deserved it, if I knew how lucky I was that he loved me enough to do this. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My tongue felt like it was glued to the roof of my mouth. When the blade finally broke the skin, it wasn't on purpose. Or maybe it was. He had been tracing the edge of my thigh, and his hand slipped. The blood came fast, warm, It ran down my leg and pooled on the tile. He paused, looked at it, then dipped 2 fingers into the blood and smeared it across my cheek. "Now you look like art," he said. "Beautiful and ruined." I wanted to disappear. The smell was unbearable. The iron tang of blood mixed with sweat and sickness. The kitchen light buzzed above us. I remember the sound more than anything, that constant electric hum that made the moment feel even more unreal. He didn't stop, not even when I started shaking so violently I could barely breathe. He told me to stop pretending, that I wasn't sick, that I was just trying to escape the truth of who I was. At some point I passed out. I woke up in my bed, clean sheets, new pajamas. The knife was gone. My legs ached. My chest burned. There was a bandage on my thigh, wrapped too tightly. My mother must have done it. She always did. She never looked at my face when she cleaned the wounds. Just my skin. Like I was an object, a thing she had to keep from falling apart, but not one she cared to understand. I stayed in that bed for 2 days. No one came to check on me. No water, no food. I think they wanted to see how long I could survive without asking for help, like I was an animal in a cage, and they were waiting for me to break. I didn't. Something inside me had shifted. I no longer cried when the pain came. I no longer wished for rescue. I began to believe that this was what life was, that pain was the only language I needed to understand. I became cold, detached. I stopped feeling like a child and started feeling like a shadow, something that moved when told, existed when needed, and disappeared the rest of the time. My father liked it. He said I was finally learning, that I was becoming the daughter he wanted. He started bringing other tools, wooden spoons, wire hangers, a broken ruler with splinters. Every object in that house had the potential to become a weapon. He didn't need to raise his voice or even touch me. Just placing something sharp on the table was enough to make my knees buckle. One night, he sat me down in front of him and asked me what I was afraid of. I said nothing. He laughed. Then he pulled the knife out again, placed it in my lap and said, "Then you've learned well." He told me to keep it, to carry it, to remember. It was his gift. I hid it in the back of my drawer. Every time I looked at it, I felt both terror and relief. Terror because I knew what it had done to me. Relief because I knew where it was, that he wasn't using it at that moment. But the worst part wasn't the blade. It was his voice, low, calm, full of twisted pride. He never screamed or never cursed. He treated me like a student, like he was passing on some secret truth about pain and control, like I was lucky to be chosen. He started calling me by a different name, not my real one, something softer, something that made me feel like a possession, like I belonged to him in a way no one else ever would. He said, "You're mine. No one will ever know you like I do." And in that moment, I believed him, because no one else ever came. No one knocked on the door. No one asked questions. No one cared. I wasn't a girl anymore. I was a wound that kept bleeding in silence. Something inside me shut off. I don't know exactly when it happened. It wasn't a scream or a breaking point. It was more like a switch flipping in the dark. One day I just stopped reacting. I didn't cry when it hurt. I didn't flinch when he touched me. I didn't scream when he cut. I stopped giving him the things he wanted most. He noticed. Of course he noticed. He always did. He told me I was getting better, that I was finally understanding my place. But I wasn't getting better. I was disappearing, slowly, quietly, like smoke through a crack in the wall. My body was still there, but I was somewhere else, far. I used to go to a place in my mind where everything was soft, a field, grass under my feet, a lake with no sound, no blood, no blade, just silence, a different kind of silence, a safe one. But he wasn't done. He brought the knife less often. He said it was boring now, that I didn't make it exciting. So he started using other things. He picked objects like he was choosing ingredients in a recipe. A toothbrush handle, a broken spoon, the cord from the vacuum. He wanted to see what left marks, what made me tremble, what forced a reaction. Sometimes when he was finished, he would sit on the floor beside me, breathing heavily, wiping sweat from his face. He'd ask if I hated him. I never answered. Once I nodded, he laughed, said hate was a kind of love, said I would understand that when I got older. My mother still came in after, like always, with her bowl of water and her cloth. She still never looked me in the eye. She still never said my name. I started pretending I was dead. I thought if I stayed still long enough, they would bury me and it would all be over. But death didn't come. Instead, I became numb. Not just to the pain, but to everything. Food lost its taste. Colors lost their meaning. Time stopped moving the way it used to. Days blurred together. I no longer remembered the sound of laughter or the feeling of being held. School was the only place that felt even remotely human. But even there, I floated. I barely spoke. I avoided mirrors. I walked with my head down and my hands clenched inside my sleeves. The teachers thought I was shy. The other kids thought I was weird. No one asked the right questions. And I had learned how to lie with a straight face. At home, the punishments turned into routines. He had a schedule. Tuesdays were quiet. Thursdays were worse. On weekends, he made me stay in my room unless he called me. I counted the cracks in the ceiling to pass the time. There were 13. I gave each one a name. I don't know why. Maybe it made me feel less alone. He stopped using his hands after a while. He started using things with weight. Heavy things. Things that could break bone if he wasn't careful. A belt buckle. A wooden spoon. A metal ruler. Once he used the handle of a broom. I bled for days, and she helped clean it. She brought towels, fresh clothes, sometimes even medicine. She never asked how deep the wounds were, never asked if I could still walk. She just did what needed to be done, like I was a mess she had to manage, like my body was just another part of the house she had to keep from falling apart. The smell of bleach became my lullaby. Every room in that house smelled like cleaning products, like someone was always trying to erase something. But the stains never left. They were on the carpet, on the walls, on my skin. I knew where every one of them came from. I remembered the sound each one made, the thud, the snap, the drip. Sometimes he would whisper things while it happened, things that didn't make sense. Things like, "You're the only one who understands me," or "They'd lock me up if they knew how much I love you." His voice would shake, and I realized it wasn't just rage. It was hunger. It was obsession. I wasn't a daughter to him. I was an outlet, a place to dump all the darkness he couldn't carry alone. And she was the silence that let it happen. I learned to watch the clock. I knew his routines. When the porch light turned off, I held my breath. When the TV volume dropped, I sat still. When his footsteps passed my door and stopped, I prepared myself. I started hiding pieces of myself. Little drawings in the closet, notes tucked into library books, words I wanted someone to find. No one ever did. The fear changed shape. It became a constant companion, not loud or sharp, just always there, like a second skin. I didn't remember what life was like before it. I didn't remember how to sleep without checking the door 3 times. I didn't remember how to smile without guilt. The abuse became so normal that I forgot it was abuse. I thought this was what life was, that everyone had secrets like mine, that pain was a private language only some people learned. There were moments I wanted to die, not in a dramatic way, not in a cry for help, just quietly. I wanted to fall asleep and never wake up. I wanted the blood to stop meaning something. I wanted the floor to swallow me whole, but I didn't die. And every day I didn't die, I hated myself more for surviving, for letting it happen again, for not screaming, for not fighting, for becoming the thing he wanted. I was a child, and I thought I had failed, because no one told me I deserved to be safe. No one told me it wasn't my fault. No one came. Not the neighbors, not the family, not the school. No one saw me, not even the people who looked directly at me. I stopped being afraid of him. I started being afraid of what I was becoming. Not human, not child, not anything. Just a shell with memories and scars. A thing that moved when called and bled in silence. And I began to wonder if that's all I'd ever be. It happened on a Tuesday. I remember the sun barely coming through the window. filtered through gray clouds that made the whole classroom feel heavy and slow. I had barely slept the night before. My stomach ached, not from hunger but from tension. I sat at my desk with my arms crossed over my midsection, trying to keep my body still. Any movement hurt. I could feel a tear in the skin near my hip, something he had done with the end of a broken coat hanger. I couldn't let anyone see. Our teacher passed out new notebooks that day, spiral-bound with blue lines and a clean white cover. Everyone else was excited. They flipped through the pages, smelling them, doodling their names on the first page. I just stared at mine. It looked too clean, too untouched, like it didn't belong in the same world I lived in. I flipped to the last page, away from where the assignments were supposed to go. I took my pencil and wrote 3 words. I don't know why I wrote them. I don't remember thinking it through. It was like my hand moved on its own. Just 3 words, scrawled in the corner of the page, smaller than a whisper. My father cuts. I didn't mean for anyone to see it. I didn't plan anything. It was more like a release valve opening for half a second before slamming shut again, like exhaling after holding your breath for too long. Class ended. We handed in our notebooks. I felt nothing, no fear, no relief. I didn't think she would notice. I had forgotten what it felt like to hope, but she noticed. She called my name in the hallway. Her voice was soft, but not weak. I stopped. My legs didn't want to move, but my body turned anyway. She looked at me, and there was something different in her eyes. Not pity, not curiosity, something heavier. She didn't say anything else. She just tilted her head toward the staff room and started walking. I followed. Inside, she asked me to lift my shirt. No anger, no shock, just calm and steady. I froze. She walked around her desk and stood in front of me, not close enough to touch, not close enough to threaten, just close enough to see. I slowly pulled up the hem of my shirt and revealed the gash across my side. It had crusted over. The skin around it was yellow and purple. There were older scars nearby, faded but still visible. She didn't gasp. She didn't cry. She nodded. "Okay," she said. "Okay." That one word cracked something inside me. No one had ever looked at my wounds and just accepted them as real, as evidence, as truth. I sat down on the little blue chair by her desk, and my whole body started to shake. She didn't touch me. She just made a phone call. Quiet, calm, efficient. She told someone we needed help, that she had a child in distress, that they needed to come now. An hour later, I was in the nurse's office with my shirt off and my arms held out. A woman in scrubs took photos of every scar, every bruise, every healing wound. She didn't flinch. She didn't ask questions. She just documented everything. I remember watching her face and trying to guess what she was thinking, but she stayed blank, like she had seen this before. She probably had. They called my mother to the school. She showed up looking flustered, hair still damp from the shower, eyes wide like she had no idea why she was there. When she saw me in that room, her lips tightened, her shoulders stiffened, but she didn't say a word. The nurse asked her if she knew about the injuries. She said no. The counselor asked how I got the cut on my thigh. My mother said I fell off my bike. I didn't have a bike. They let her talk, let her spin her version. But the nurse was holding a bag with the clothes I had been wearing the day before, blood-soaked underwear, a ripped shirt. She held them out and asked, "Did you wash these?" My mother stared at the bag. She said nothing. They asked if I could go home with her. The nurse said no. That night I was placed in a shelter, a place with bunk beds and lockable bathroom doors. The mattress was thin, but it didn't matter. No one came into the room after lights out. No one touched me in the dark. No one whispered my name like a threat. I lay there and stared at the ceiling. I didn't know where I would go next. I didn't know if he was in jail or if she was back home pretending to fold my clothes. I didn't know if this was freedom or just a new kind of cage. But for the first time in years, I wasn't bleeding. And for the first time in years, someone had believed me without needing to be convinced. I still didn't speak much. Words felt dangerous, but I listened. To the sound of footsteps that didn't stop outside my door, to the sound of locks clicking from the inside, to the sound of my own breath coming steady in the silence. They told me I'd be placed with a foster family soon. that I'd have a social worker, that I'd go to court. The word court made me feel sick. I didn't want to see his face again. I didn't want to hear my mother lie. But part of me knew it had to happen, that if I didn't speak now, he would keep doing it to someone else. A few days later, they took me to the hospital, not for my injuries, but for a full evaluation. They checked everything: my bones, my internal organs, my reproductive system. The doctor said I had injuries consistent with long-term trauma. The social worker wrote it down. They asked if I wanted to press charges. I didn't know what that meant. I was still a child, but I nodded. And that was the first decision I made for myself in years. I didn't go home after that. Home was no longer a word I understood. It had become a place filled with shadows and silence and blood. Instead, they placed me in a foster house, run by an older woman named Margaret. She had soft hands and eyes that didn't flinch when they saw my scars. She didn't ask too many questions. She let me sleep, let me eat when I was ready, let me be quiet without making it feel wrong. Her house smelled like cinnamon and old books. There were plants in every corner, soft music playing in the kitchen, and a dog named Blue who followed me everywhere. It was the first time I could breathe without counting seconds between footsteps. Margaret didn't try to fix me. She didn't tell me I had to smile or talk or be normal. She just existed beside me. She left the bathroom light on at night. She never closed doors all the way. She knocked softly even when bringing me food. And every morning she made tea. Not for her, for me. A different kind each day, placed on the table beside a folded napkin. Some mornings I drank it, others I didn't. She never commented either way. One day she asked me if I liked flowers. I shrugged. She smiled and said, "I think you do. You just forgot." The next afternoon she drove me to a flower shop. It was small and quiet, tucked between a bakery and an antique store. The air inside was cool and smelled like soil and roses. She told me to pick something, anything. I stood in front of the shelves and stared at rows of color. It felt foreign, too bright, too alive. My hand hovered over a pot of white lilies. I chose them because they looked soft, because they didn't scream for attention. She paid for them without a word and carried them home herself. That was the beginning of my healing. It didn't happen all at once. There were still nights when I woke up gasping, still moments when a sound or a word or a smell dragged me backward. Trauma doesn't ask permission. It doesn't knock politely. It breaks in and makes itself at home. But slowly, I started to return to myself. Therapy helped. So did time. So did knowing that I was believed. The court process was long. He denied everything at first. My mother testified in his defense, said I was troubled, said I made things up, said I was angry because they disciplined me. The prosecutors showed photos, medical reports, testimonies. They showed the words I wrote in the back of that school notebook. My father stared straight ahead during the entire trial. My mother wouldn't look at me. I was asked to testify. They told me I didn't have to, but I said yes. I was tired of being quiet. I stood there with my hands clenched and told the truth. Every word. They found him guilty on multiple counts, sentenced him to decades in prison. My mother was charged too for negligence and obstruction. I didn't cry. I didn't cheer. I just felt still, like a storm had finally passed and left only dust. Years went by. I stayed with Margaret until I aged out of the system. She became more than a foster parent. She became the only mother I ever really had. She taught me how to bake banana bread, how to read poetry out loud, how to sit in silence without needing to fill it. I never went back to that house. I never wanted to. Instead, I built a life, slowly, gently. I opened a small flower shop in a quiet town in North Carolina, the kind of place where everyone knows your name, but no one asks too much unless you invite them in. I named the shop Still Bloom, because that's what I had done. I had bloomed, despite it all, because of it all. People come in to buy flowers for weddings, for birthdays, for funerals. And I listen. I tie ribbons. I wrap stems. I water the pots and greet the morning sun with fingers still shaky but no longer afraid. Sometimes children ask about my scars. I tell them they're old stories, ones that I don't read anymore. Sometimes teenagers come in looking broken. I offer tea. I offer space. I don't ask questions. I just make sure they leave with something alive in their hands. Healing isn't perfect. It doesn't erase. It doesn't undo. But it does soften. And soften is enough. It is more than enough. There are still moments when I hear his voice in the back of my mind, when I flinch at his sudden sound, when I feel a ghost hand brush my skin. But those moments are just echoes now. They do not control me. I am not what he did to me. I am not the silence of my mother. I am the child who survived. I am the woman who bloomed. And if you're listening, if you felt alone, if your pain was ever hidden behind a locked door in a quiet house, I want you to know something. You are not invisible. You are not to blame. And it is not too late. Thank you for walking this journey with me. If my story reached a part of you that needed light, please consider staying a little longer. The next video is on the screen. It might be the one your heart needs most today.